Good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad to see so many of you are here to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart. I go back to my, high school days to lead off this discussion. I'm from Connecticut originally, although I've lived on Long Island longer than I lived in Connecticut. But I was born and raised in Norwalk, and the town just east of us is Westport. Well, starting in about 1968 or so, mentioned the total lunar eclipse on Good Friday, 1968, I really caught the bug then, looking at that eclipse. It was later that year that my mom and dad took me down to the Stanford Museum and Nature Center in Stamford, Connecticut, where they have a planetarium and they had an observatory with a 22-inch Gregory Mixoudov telescope in it at the time. There was an adult club that met on the first Friday of every month, and there was a junior club that met on the second Friday of every month. And so, being only 13 years old at the time, I joined the junior club and proceeded from there. Well, fast forward about 6 months or so, and ultimately I found myself being the president of the club, with my friend Al Papson here as vice president. And the club, I think, we did pretty well with it. I like to think we did. And the membership grew. And among other people other kids who joined the club was a fellow named Scott Hyman from Westport. And got to know him pretty well, and a little bit younger than I am. And he said to me some years later, in 1975, he said to me, you know, there's an observatory up in Westport you might be interested in seeing. I said, really? Tell me about it. So he mentioned it was named Rolnick Observatory at the time. The property was on an old Nike missile radar tracking site. And there were two towers, 30 some odd feet tall towers, and on the south tower there was an observatory built back in the 1960s. But it sort of fell into rack and ruin. Vandalism, the telescope had to be stored in a basement of the high school observatory. But then along comes a teacher, a physics teacher, with the school system there named Fred Bump. And Fred wanted to resurrect it. He wanted to get it up and running again. And Scott told me, well, you know, he's looking for people, kids, really to get involved. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. I didn't drive a car back then, but I rode a bike. And so I rode my bike from where I lived in Norwalk up to Westport, which is around a 20-mile ride, maybe something like that. And when I got to the address on Bayberry Lane for the observatory, I looked up, it's set back on a bit of a hill. I saw this tower that you see over here on the left with this observatory dome on top of it. I looked at it, I said, holy whatever. I said, I got to get involved. And long story short, I did. And so this is the story of the Westport Observatory, as it's called now, and also the forming and continued growth of the Westport Astronomical Society. Go ahead, I'll let you do it. So I can't see it. Oh, there it is over there? Okay, fine. All right. Okay, good. We'll do that one. Okay, there we are. That's the observatory site today. You can see the observatory itself. Let me get out my pointer. To the upper left-hand corner, right over here, our parking lot. A couple of buildings. This building over here, remember this goes back to the late 50s when this was an Army, again, radar tracking site. I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. But this building over here and this building over here, they were both original Army structures. The other building, a couple of small observatories here and a couple of outbuildings there and there, they're recent additions that we did to the club. But that's the observatory site as it appears today. Well, let's go back in time to when things really began, because the observatory looks a whole lot different now than it did back then. So we'll go into the WAS, as we call it, Westport Astronomical Society Wayback Machine, and take a look and see what we can find. I'm going to go way back in time to the 1950s, the dawn of the space age and the dawn of the Cold War, of course. The space age had arrived, but so had the Cold War. And how many of you remember doing this in elementary school, besides me? Geez, you're old. I mean, good Lord, to remember that. But yeah, you know, hiding. Quite honestly, what good would that have done? Oh yeah, that desk is going to protect me from a nuclear bomb. Yeah, okay, that's a good idea. But the Army at the time installed a number of Nike missile launch sites and support radar tracking sites all over the place. Connecticut alone had 15, and that's a plot showing where they are. Here are the locations starting alphabetically with Ansonia and going all the way down to Westport, which is down over here. There were two sites in Westport, one on North Street, or North Avenue, I should say, right over here. Those were the silos. That was the serious stuff. Okay. Interestingly enough, built directly adjacent to the high school. That's an interesting choice. And then, straight line, maybe 2 miles away, on one of the highest points in the town, on Bayberry Lane, is the radar tracking. Now you see it's abbreviated as BR-73. BR-73. That was the site. That was the Nike site, BR-73. All of them had either BR abbreviations, like here over in Fairfield, Connecticut on the water, BR-65, over toward, Bridgeport, Milford, and so forth, BR this, BR that. You go up to Hartford, and you see all of the designations begin HA, BR for Bridgeport, HA for Hartford. And that was pretty much the scattering around. Our location on Bayberry Lane, that's the one I'm going to be talking about, part of BR-73. Well, why did they locate so many sites so close to Bridgeport and so close to Hartford? Well, those were two considered to be strategic locations for the defense industry at the time. I mean, you had Sikorsky, you had General Dynamics, Remington Arms and Munitions, and so forth. And so they were considered to be strategic locations, and so the Army wanted to protect those locations from foreign adversaries, and so they built these sites. The sites were, at least the Westport site, was only active from 1956 to 1963. So it had a pretty short lifespan, certainly. Now, the shot that you see over here on the left, shows some Nike Ajax missiles over here. That's not the Westport site. That's just sort of an example of what it would have looked like. The missiles were stored in silos deep underground, unlike you see over here where they're up above in the sunlight and so forth. And then you see another setup what they look like over here on the right-hand side. Today, the location of that launch site is Bedford Middle School. So that's kind of interesting how it became from that to a school. But like I say, it was directly adjacent to Staples High School at the time as well. As far as the location of the observatory, BR-73, 180 Bayberry Lane is the address. Again, this is not a photograph of the original site in Westport, but it gives an indication of what a typical radar tracking site looked like. You had tall, primarily steel reinforced concrete towers going dozens of feet above the ground, and on top of a platform, in this case it's hexagonal, the one we have is square, with the radar instruments on top. Well, like I say, this is just sort of an example. This is actually part of our site over here. We see here an ancillary tower right over there. This blown out shell, because that's kind of how it was left, ultimately became what we call our warm room. Okay, but at the time when we took over the club, that is, before the club even formed, it was really just a blown out shell with a lot of vandalism to deal with. Down by the road itself, again, the towers are up on a hill. Down by the road, Bayberry Lane, we have this structure over here, which was called the IFC, the Integrated Fire Control. So that's where all the buttons were located that you might want to push. The site here is pretty significant from just a movie history lesson because it was the inspiration, this site rather, was the inspiration for a movie called Rally Round the Flag Boys, starring Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward. That husband and wife team, they were so impressed with Westport, apparently they filmed on some locations in Westport, that they ultimately moved there. And they lived there until literally the days they died. And Newman's Own, if you're familiar with the spaghetti sauce and the pizzas and all that, based also because of Westport up there. Well, the site itself, we go from there, was turned over to the school, the town ultimately to the school system in 1963. The Army vacated, and said, okay, you're left with all the leftovers. Essentially, a couple of towers and these other buildings and so forth. The building itself that you see there, the IFC, ultimately now is occupied by the Astronomical Health District, local health district up there. But what to do with those two towers? They were eyesores, as you can see from this recent picture I took of the North Tower, as it was called. Bayberry was chosen, the Bayberry Lane was chosen because it's one of the highest points in the town, about 232 feet above sea level. The tower itself is 34 feet tall from ground to up top over there. And as you can see, it really hasn't been tended to since it was gifted to the town some 60 years ago or so. Inside, you have this huge concrete pier 30 feet off the ground going up like so. I don't know what the diameter is. Okay, it's more than I can stretch. Bob Meadows, you here? What, you know how, he's the brains behind this. What's the diameter of that tower? Any idea? Don't recall. I was going to say it's got to be 6-7 feet. Yeah, something like that. And solid concrete going up 34 feet. At the top, it was capped off with a perfect square concrete pad, which is where the instrumentation was positioned. Well, as soon as the town took occupancy of this land and it was then deeded over to the school system, they said, okay, what are we going to do with this? What good can we do with this? Well, an article ran in the Westport News, local weekly newspaper that still comes out today, that said an observatory is planned on the Nike school site. If you can see the date, you look very carefully, it says May 6, 1965. And it shows the tower. It's not a very good shot, I apologize, but it shows the tower over there. So it says Future Student Observatory. The town was gifted with a 12.5-inch Newtonian reflector made by a local town resident named Jerry Rolnick. So he gifted the town with just the optical tube assembly, though, nothing beyond that. So that was a good beginning, certainly. The scope had many parts made by Criterion Manufacturing Company up in Hartford. So many of you old timers remember Criterion as sort of the name, one of the names, in telescopes back in this time frame. A more modern view showing the view over here of the observatory, which was built on top of the concrete slab and an ash dome put on top of it. The ash dome was installed in, does it say over here, 1967, maybe late 66, something like that. And the dome is still in use today. It's the same dome. We've replaced motors and some other gearing and that sort of thing. But the dome itself is still the same as it was. You had each tower had a single, I should say, vertical ladder that went up 34 feet. There was a safety cage around it. But let's face it, if you ever climb a vertical ladder, you see these safety cages, how much safety do they really imply? And the answer is nothing at all in terms of fall protection. The only safety there is, instead of falling down straight, you fall banging back and forth against the cage on your way down, probably hang up your leg or break your leg. So I'm not too sure how much safety there was, but that was the way you got up. Okay, we can't have that for the general public, certainly. And so wooden stairs were installed with 2 landings along the way as you climbed up. We still use that stair design today. The stairs themselves have been replaced due to just age, but it's the same basic design as we use today that came out back in 1967. Down at the base, and you can't see here, but go down to the ground over here, and you'll see that the corrugated steel sides went down only to about 5 or so feet off the ground, and then they stopped. And so you had this gap. Okay. Well, the Army, because it was a secure facility, the Army put some pretty basic fencing around it, chain link fence, and they put a door on one side also. Well, that's fine if you're a controlled access military facility, but if you're uncontrolled and pretty much anybody can go there, let's face it, kids are kids. The vandalism and so forth. They broke into the observatory, and all kinds of things were going on, and so that proved to be a problem. But the observatory was installed nonetheless. There you see another shot of it, and the telescope was installed. Now you can get a feel for the openness underneath. That's chain link fence. You can't quite see it, but that's chain link fence there. They tried to make it secure, but it was a pretty dismal failure. Well, anyway. The project was overseen by the science curriculum director for the system, Rufus Morton, he spoke to a local resident who became known to him, Chuck Scoville. Scoville was also the director of the Stanford Observatory, which is where my club met back in the late 60s into the 70s, but he lived in Westport. So the two of them talked about this, and they decided that they need to come up with a mount for this telescope. And back then, really the best choice, at least in terms of being local, was to go back to Criterion and get one of their German equatorial mounts. And it looked kind of like that. Now here's just a blurb from the telescope company. So you can see a pretty classic German equatorial mount. The telescope tube itself was not solid like Criterion sold commercially, but rather when Rollnick created the telescope, I guess he tried to lighten it up. It still weighed a ton. And he would put sections over here, open sections. Rotating rings right over here, and another one right over there. Allowed you to rotate the telescope around. And the open sections over here, because it was inside of a dome, you didn't really worry about light pollution affecting it, getting and infiltrating the optical path. And so it was put into use for a limited time. Very limited time, because it wasn't long after this was installed that Rufus Morton, the science curriculum director, left the school system. It was abandoned, orphaned, and nobody else came along, at least not initially. Okay. So vandalism occurred, parts of the telescopes were taken, the dome was punctured by bullets from below. Those holes still exist today, they've been plastered over. Okay. Quick story, just going out of chronological order for a minute. Back in, had to be about 1976 or 7, I was in the dome myself, and very quiet, very quiet. All of a sudden I heard inside this dome, it's like you're inside of a drum, bullets hitting the dome. I decided I wanted to get out of that dome pretty quickly, and so I did, but called the police, and they never did find them, but anyway. So that was still a practice even back into the rather mid to late 70s. The telescope itself had to be taken out from the observatory, put down the basement of the local high school, and so forth. And there it just sat for years and years and years. And the quality of the observatory, vandalism, decayed for years and years and years as well. Until in 1975, along comes the founder, Fred Bump. Now, Fred's been to Stellafane. He's not here this year, apparently, but he's been to Stellafane, I don't know how many years. He lives just down in Brattleboro now. But he was a junior high science teacher at the time. He heard about this, interested in astronomy as he was. He heard about this telescope. He heard about the observatory. He wanted to do something about it. Okay. There's a shot of the early observatory when we've just gotten the work party together because we were going to seal off this bottom area, get rid of the chain link fence, cut that out, throw that away, and put in concrete blocks covered outside and inside with fiberglass reinforced concrete. I think Saccrete made it. And it's the same stuff we have there today. We've painted it, sure, but it hasn't required really any significant maintenance, I don't believe. But that's what it looked like. This picture, by the way, I took this picture. I climbed up that vertical ladder on the North Tower. Idiot I was doing that. And I took that picture and then I came back down again. So I didn't fall. I was happy about that. But that was not for the faint of heart. Let me climb that tower up. And that's somebody's house, not on the property, but there's a little cul-de-sac right over here. You can't see it, the observatory blocking it. And yeah, they're right there. I don't know if they were the ones with the guns, but maybe they didn't like that. But yeah, no, and they're still there today, but the trees are significantly higher. So down on the ground, if you're down on ground level, you can't see the house. Okay, they can see the observatory, but you have to be up pretty much. We have a deck around it, around the dome itself. You have to be up there to really see them. So the trees have grown pretty quickly. So anyway, again, he heard about the telescope, the observatory. He wanted to resurrect it. Fred did, I mean. And so he set out to do a little research to find out what needs to be done. As luck would have it, that same year, one of his students, a fellow named Dan Lasley, got talking to Fred about this telescope and about astronomy. They both shared that interest. Well, it turns out that Dan's dad, Jerry Lasley, was comptroller for Perkin-Elmer Corporation, famous for the Hubble Space Telescope mirror, Jerry had an interest in astronomy as well. So the three of them got together, Fred, Dan, and Jerry, and started to talk about this. Well, at the same time, my buddy Scott Hyman was a student, and he's the one who told me about it. So that's about the right time frame we're looking at, 1975, early 75, maybe even late 74. But they all three share that common interest with astronomy. Fred tried to put an action plan together. What are we going to do? And so the first thing we decided to do was to, while the telescope was being refurbished by Perkin-Elmer, again, Lasley had some clout in the corporation, and so Perkin-Elmer resurrected the mirrors, reground them, coated them, and so forth. As they were being refurbished, the tower access was going to be secured, putting the block around the base over there so people couldn't break into it. Installed a pretty decent door also, so that people couldn't break in that way as well. And we set to work. That's Fred in the picture. I apologize. I know I took pictures. I can't find them, so I had to kind of rely on what I could find. But that's Fred over there. These were the early players in the formation of the observatory, and ultimately the formation of the club 50 years ago. I mentioned Jerry and Dan Lasley, Marty Fallier, Mickey Marks, Scott Hyman, there he is over there, the Norton brothers, Marion Warren, she was there, and the others, and me down over here on the bottom as well. We were all involved with the resurrection of the observatory. And it took a good year to make the repairs that we needed to get the thing working. So it started in 74, really. Here we are, Fred on the left, me in the middle, and Jerry over there on the right, and I'm not too sure who the girl is. I guess maybe that could be his daughter. Pulling the telescope that was delivered by Perkin-Elmer out of Jerry's Caprice Classic station wagon, okay? The old land yacht over there. So there we are pulling it out, and we then had to carry it up those stairs, and there we are carrying it up the stairs about like so. We had to put it on top of, at this point, we had the German equatorial mount, the Criterion mount. We had that on this concrete pillar that probably stood so high or thereabouts, but we had to put the mount and pedestal on top of that concrete pillar and then put the telescope up there. So I'm going like this because I couldn't reach it. Okay, it was getting pretty high. Here you can get a feel in this picture. Here's the concrete pier. Okay, here I am in the background. Here's Fred looking at it. And where's the eyepiece? Okay, where's the eyepiece? Well, he's looking for it, and it's there. His eye is, and the eyepiece is, I don't know, someplace over there. Okay, that was a problem. Okay, that was a bit of a chore. How did we get up to the eyepiece? Well, Fred's standing at it right over there. It was one of these ladders that you see in Home Depot and other warehouses and so forth. It was a pretty cramped area under the dome, so we had to move that ladder around and then climb up the stairs just to get to the finder, and then move the telescope because it was only star hopping. We didn't really get setting circles, mechanical setting circles up and running just then, and we were able to get it to work, but it was quite the chore. Real quick sidebar story. I mentioned these two rotating rings over here. Well, there was one afternoon that I was up there. In fact, the three of us were, but the other two guys were downstairs outside. I was the only one in the dome. And I grabbed the mirror end of the telescope tube right over here because I wanted to rotate the eyepiece for some reason. Okay? Well, I don't know how many of you are familiar with the deluxe Dynoscope German equatorial mount and the rotating rings, but each ring had, it was either 3 or it could have been 5, very, very, very tiny nylon tabs, each about the size of a pencil eraser. Okay, installed in a channel, and then they stuck up. They were kind of pointy, rounded point to them, and they stuck up into a mating channel in the rings here. Okay, so you had the one ring and the other, and so you rotate it around. Well, anyway, I was doing that, and this was a heavy telescope. I rotated, the tabs broke, and the whole telescope goes boom into my chest. Well, I started to scream bloody murder because I thought I'd ruined the telescope. Thankfully, I didn't, but we had to come up with a better design than that, certainly, afterwards, because we wouldn't want that to happen during a public night or anything like that. That picture came from Westport News, and I'm not going to read all this over here, the caption, But you'll see that the observatory grand reopening this Saturday night, May 24th, total lunar eclipse. Another lunar eclipse figures into my life. We were open to the public. It was partly cloudy, so we were actually able to see it and so forth. But as usual, we were also looking for money to complete the restoration, so we were looking for donations and so forth, which we got. The town was very supportive. Others continue to contribute as well. I mentioned a couple of names before, Marion Warren, Kevin King, John Levy there involved as well. But the big problem was that the ladder, trying to get up to the eyepiece. Well, we quickly figured out that's never going to do, and so we built a platform which was almost as high as the concrete sphere, or not sphere, cylinder rather, that the telescope was on, telescope mount was on. And so you were able to walk up one of two stairs on either side, get up to roughly where the telescope is, and then you can go from there. In fact, you can see the two of them are standing on, it's kind of tough to see, but there they are standing on the floor of the observatory, the new floor. So is he over here, not climbing that really tall ladder. So we put that into place pretty quickly as well. Easier access to the eyepiece, and also allowed for a built-in table for star charts and eyepieces and other accessories you might want to spread out. Well, it was about this same time that Fred and the rest of us thought, it'd be really nice to make this more official than just a group of townsfolk and students and what have you. And the students, since we're talking about youth in astronomy, students were very supportive. The high school kids, junior high school kids, me, I was going into college at the time. You had a lot of youth involved with this resurrection of the observatory. Yes, the adults were there, but they were serving more in the capacity of telling you what to do. And a lot of the kids really did a lot of the grunt work. At least I think so. We began to hold formation meetings for the club at the Westport Nature Center, or it's really the Nature Center for Environmental Activities is the formal name, at least it was back at the time. Our first meeting was in June of 1975, where we elected officers. Fred pretty quickly became president. I became editor of the newsletter, so I started to write all of a sudden. And the club formed. That was the first newsletter I put out back in, what was that, August of 75 as well. And so the club started to grow. It caught more and more attention by the townsfolk. I was just talking, he gave a progress report of the observatory and so forth. Well, the observatory was great, but if we were going to have townsfolk coming in, we wanted to have some more support structures to make it a more complete experience, not the least of which would include a bathroom. Okay? And so the blown-out building over here that didn't have a door, didn't have windows, didn't really have much of anything, eventually evolved into the warm room, as we call it. Officially, the Clinton B. Ford warm room, because Clint Ford lived in Wilton, town just to the northwest of Westport, was very generous, very, very generous. He was active in the AAVSO at the time, for those who might recall the name. Very generous, donating money for us to resurrect this observatory, and it seemed only fitting to name it in his honor. We got rid of all the graffiti. We put in a new door, new windows, installed a bathroom, a dark room. Remember dark rooms? Yeah, we had a dark room there. Heat, which was pretty nice, a sofa, a little refrigerator, what have you. And it became a nice hangout, especially if the clouds came and you were waiting for it to try to clear. It had a library and so forth. And that was back in 1977 or thereabouts. We then created, with that second old Army building, we then created the Frederick Bump Educational Center, which is where the monthly meetings are held, have been since 1991, and so forth. Here we see the inside of the meeting room. That's the entranceway into the room, about like so. Bob Deegan, president at the time, was really instrumental in getting this going, because we had to get permission to do all these modifications on the building from the town. And the town was pretty cooperative. I mean, there were speed bumps, as you would expect, but the town was actually very, very cooperative with our doing what we want to do with the club and the facility. Now, the telescope itself went through a facelift, first of which was back in the 90s, led by a member no longer with us named Charles Leeper. He oversaw it. The primary mirror was refigured to f4.8. Perkin-Elmer was again involved with that. The tube itself was replaced from the original to a fiberglass tube. The mount itself was replaced with a fork mount, and that's what it looked like there. And it remained functional until 2004, when Carl Lancaster, who's over where'd you go? Oh, there he is over Bob Meadows is also here, Martin Hamar is also here, and Bob Tobin's not. But they took it a step further with the telescope mount and the other facilities under the dome itself. First to install go-to control on the telescope, for instance. Okay. Well, about the same time, roughly, 1992 actually, the club went to buy a new telescope, a 25-inch obsession telescope. And you'll see it right up on the hill over here. Bob Meadows brings it up every year to Stellafane, dragging it behind his minivan and sets it up, which is quite a chore, but I think everybody who looks through it appreciates it because it is really quite a fantastic telescope. It goes to the Connecticut Star Party with other outreach activities. I'll talk about them toward the end that we do as well. And it remains even to this day the largest publicly accessible observatory in the state. Starting in 1995, and it lasted about 14 or so years, we actually had a junior club. It was called TNG, Westport Astronomical Society, The Next Generation. It was headed up by a husband and wife member, Merrill and Tom Zelenak. Phil Flynn also, who was president at the time, contributed to it as well. And it was aimed toward younger kids. I mean, most junior clubs were more to middle school, maybe high school, but here we're talking more elementary school level, 7 to 10 years old. And they used to get together every month also, and do games like Astronomy Jeopardy, and what's the other one, Stump the Stargazers, where senior members, adults, would come and they'd try to play games, who can answer this question, who can't answer the question, and so forth. And of course they would view through the club telescopes as well. Many of the members went on to join the club as full adult members as well. The 12.5 inch was eventually replaced with a Meade 16-inch Schmidt-Cast grain in September of 2017. That was around for only a few years when it was replaced then with a 14-inch Celestron Edge HD catadioptric. That's the telescope that's up there today. We also have two outbuildings, I'll call them, two observatories, which is just sort of coming online or have just come online recently. In the green dome over there, you have a 9.25 inch Schmidt-Cast on an ioptron mount. Over in the white dome, it's a 14-inch Ritchie-Chrétien, and we're in the process of hopefully making it available online for remote use and remote observing. I mentioned before we do a lot of outreach as well with the local community. We go to the Yankee Doodle Fair in Westport every year. We go over to there's Newtown, which is up toward Danbury. There's a vineyard there, Aquila's Nest Vineyard, and do observing sessions there as well a few times a year. Libraries, Darien, Westport Library. Up in Danbury is Mission Technologies, where we go visit them as well. So we not only, and that's what Springfield is doing here. The STM also doing outreach. I was talking to Cecilia, the president, about this yesterday, and I think that's terrific. Clubs need to go to the people. You can't wait for the people to come to you. You go to the people, and all of a sudden now they will come to you once you let them kind of catch the bug from you. They will certainly come to you. So if you're a member of a club and you're looking for ways to get people involved, non-members right now, like I say, go to them. Reach out to schools, to libraries, and so forth. And vineyards apparently work too. Get them enough wine in there. They love looking at the stars, and so forth. We go to the Connecticut Star Party. Obviously, Stellafane, we go as well. In the years that we've been around, we've seen a lot of stuff up at Westport. Just about all these were open to the public. Started in May of '75 with a total lunar eclipse. A year later in '76, how many of you saw Comet West? Now that's a comet, right? That was a comet. Okay. We had '86, we had Halley's Comet. Okay, you take the good with the bad. That wasn't such a big thing, but the observatory was overrun with people who wanted to see the comet. They didn't realize it was going to be just this little, nothing much, sorry. But the observatory was overrun. We still do, on a regular basis, Messier marathons. They were typically headed up by a former member who now lives, well, he's still a member, but he now lives in Virginia, Cal Powell. He always coordinates it, and I've participated in a number of times as well. I think our best is 105, maybe 107 objects we saw in one night. So we did a pretty good job there. But that still goes on even to this day. As far as what else we've seen, Hale Bopp, of course, before that Hyakutake the year before as well. So we've had some nice comets. Trances of Venus in 2004 and 2012 as well. 2004 one was kind of exciting because of all the clouds, but it eventually bore fruit. Speaking of eclipses, okay, transit is a very tiny eclipse, but you go to August of 2017, that's the property with all the people. And they were coming up the hill. I don't know where they parked, but it was only 70% partial. But the level of attraction that eclipse generated in August of 2017 was really, has never been seen again, really. Maybe with Halley it was. But other than that, not really unprecedented. Beautiful total lunar eclipse in January of 2019. Our member Michael Southam took that montage that you see over here, sequence photo. In the middle of the COVID universe in July of 2020, comet Neowise was certainly caught attention just this past fall, and I'm not going to pronounce the name, but you know it, Comet T Atlas. I'm not going to butcher the name. Put on quite a show as well, and caught the attention of the public because the observatory is open regularly just for open houses, but when there's a special event, we open as well and encourage people to come. And the towns surrounding are very supportive, which is nice to see. Partial eclipse, coming up in May of 2079 is our next total solar eclipse visible from Westport, so put your reservations in now. They're coming. We had a beautiful aurora visible just last October, also just this past May. And you see the aurora there dancing over the observatory. All this has only been possible because of the dedication of the members that we've had in the club, not just Fred in the very beginning and the rest of us so-called quote-unquote founders, but people who have come along in the last 50 years as well. So we'd like to give special thanks to all the elected officers that have held roles in the club's existence for those last 50 years. Carl Lancaster, John Kamen, now obtained us not-for-profit status back in, 1990 or thereabouts. The next generation flourished for about 14 years. It'd be really nice to get it going again. It takes, member time and so forth, and it's something that we can certainly effort as well. And in the 50 years, we've had 2 observatory directors. We have Fred Bump and we have Bob Meadows. And if it wasn't for those 2 people's dedication, none of this would have been possible. Not the club, not the observatory, not nothing. So it fell to those two individuals who really carry the weight of the place. And, of course, many of the presidents that we've had over the course, this is not a complete list, but it's the only names I could think of at the time, so I know I'm missing a couple. But, again, they directed the club, and that was, again, a really monumental responsibility as well. As far as beyond today, the club has gone from a small band of us trying to resurrect this really dilapidated observatory, and has turned it into one of the most active clubs in all of New England. Between the activities we have for members, activities we have for the public, and so forth, it really is a community event, this observatory, which is really the ideal chemistry you want between those of us who are members and the rest of the community who like to see what we are all about. As we go into our second half century, I should say, I'm reminded of a favorite bumpism, as I call it, from Fred, who decades ago, he was the first to utter our catchphrase, how was is, and it certainly continues to be today. Thank you. If anybody has any questions, we have a few minutes. Shoot.
Is the township good about lighting orders and stuff like that?
Yeah, they have worked with the school, the observatory, to make sure that there's down lighting, like toward the health offices that you saw at the bottom over here, down lighting and so forth. We did have one, I'll say challenge, but it was worked out amicably because there was a cell phone tower put up. But that's okay. Okay, that's okay because the lighting was directed away from the observatory, so that's swell. And now also the company contributes to some of the maintenance of the roads and this and that, so that works as well. yeah. So. Any other? Good question. How many members? I'm looking at the people over here. They know more than I do about numbers. 150? Okay, about 150 or thereabouts. Young, old, all around. Yeah, yeah, multiple ages. We have a couple of really, really sharp young members who are in the club also. Yeah, very, very sharp. Okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
What happened to the original Newtonian telescope?
We still have it. It's not in operation right now, but we still do have it. It's in our education center, the classroom that we use for meetings. So it's over there. Yeah. So no, it's cared for. We're not, we're not doing what the town did to it, 50 years ago. But yeah, it's not in active use currently. Be nice if it was resurrected. It's a gorgeous telescope. So anyway, but that's me. Any other questions? Yeah, yep, we pull it out also. I say we, they pull it out also. And yeah, that comes as well. So typically you have 2 members assigned to the observatory itself and 1 member with the 25. Yeah. And they have to climb the ladder to get to the eyepiece, but yeah, what are you gonna do? So, any other questions? Go ahead, I'm sorry, yeah. That's a heck of a question. I don't know. Quite honestly, when I was putting this talk together, and I came to that map over there that showed them all around Connecticut, I'm like, really? What do I know? I was born, the year I was born, they were building these silly things, and I have no idea. I mean, I see one in Fairfield right down by the Sound, like, really? So that's a project. I want to see exactly where they were as best as I can. There's one website that I found that supposedly claims to give you a lot of technical information, so I type in the URL, and all of a sudden Firefox says, oh, death is imminent, go away from this website. So I'm like, okay, well, I can't do that. So I'm not too sure what's going on there. But, so I got to dig into it a little bit deeper, yeah.
There were a bunch on Long Island also.
Yeah, there were a bunch on Long Island. Think of Camp, the one we were just talking about it 2 hours ago. Yeah, exactly, Camp Hero, yeah. Is that right? In Talcott Mountain? Oh, I didn't know. I didn't know that.
There are certain facilities that fall into disrepair and trying to work with them to restore them and get them back operational.
Huh. I didn't know that. Yeah, he's in the Westport Club, but yeah, Talcott Mountain, north of Hartford, northwest of Hartford.
My comment would be that there were an awful lot of these. Don't forget, in the 1950s, they were not shooting at missiles; they were shooting at bombers, and these missiles that look pathetic by today's standards would have been perfectly adequate to shoot down the big propeller-driven Tupolev bombers that you saw that Ukraine destroyed a few of them not that long ago. They've been using those same bombers ever since the 1950s, and we're not worried about them so much anymore. Is Janet? Oh, yes.
Okay, great. So if you want to do the boo list over there, as I call it, the boo list. Okay, great.
And I think that the telescopic list, too, is out there, isn't it? So if
Okay,
you want
so you get 'em
printed
over there.
copies of either of the observing Olympic lists, there they are.
No charts, just the list themselves. Yeah. Yeah.
So at any rate, I think that's...
Charts are the charts there too? Oh, okay. Okay, so there are some chart copies there too. Okay. Any other questions, comments? No?
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Phil.